Welcome to Classroom TV. Today I'm going to talk about transportation. Initially I'll be covering about transportation in human beings. That would be like a continuation of the previous class, that is about the heart, and then I would be covering transportation in plants. Okay. So in the previous session I have explained you guys that heart acts like a pump. It helps in transportation of blood to all parts of the body. It transports deoxygenated blood which goes to the lungs, gets purified and is distributed to all parts of our body. Now let us go through the working of the heart once again because it's very important. So as I have explained, always blue is for deoxygenated blood, okay, and red represents oxygenated blood. So the blood enters the heart through superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, okay. So the deoxygenated blood is entering the heart through superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. It first enters right atrium. Okay, these are very important parts. So first let us name the parts and go to the working. Okay. So if anyone asks you name the parts of circulatory system, you can't just say that there are two atriums, two ventricles and that's it. You need to name everything in detail. Like here, what I mean by that is you need to name superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, then right atrium, right ventricle. Then I told you that there are three cusps between right atrium and right ventricle which acts like a door, and that is called as tricuspid valve. It's easy to remember because it has three cusps, so it's tricuspid valve. And then in between left atrium and left ventricle you have a two-door version, okay. So it's basically like a two folded door, okay. So that is the bicuspid valve. And you have pulmonary artery that carries deoxygenated blood, and you have pulmonary vein that carries oxygenated blood, okay. So let me tell you guys something. Always arteries carry pure blood, whereas veins carry impure blood, okay. So but that is not true for pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein, because pulmonary artery is carrying impure blood over here, right, and pulmonary vein is carrying pure blood. So this is a tricky question which will be repeated in your 10th, it will be repeated in your 11th and 12th and even in future whenever you take science, because this is a tricky question, because it's like everyone assumes that artery always carries pure blood and veins always carry impure blood, but that's not true in this case, okay. So we have named the parts, so I hope we are clear on the parts. That is the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve, then pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. And also I have told you guys this, the whole heart is covered by a covering, just like how our glass boxes are covered in a thermocol whenever you order from Amazon or any other site. That is called as pericardium, okay. So this is the outermost covering which protects the heart. So we have named the parts right now, so let's go to the working. Now what is the working of the heart? So whenever the deoxygenated blood comes from superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, it goes to right atrium, okay. And what happens when right atrium is filled with blood, right, it needs to push the blood to the right ventricle. And how will it happen? Because imagine this is right atrium and this is right ventricle, so this is filled with blood. So if it has to go down, the door should be open, right? So now tricuspid valves open and then the blood goes from right atrium to right ventricle. Are we clear? So the blood is going from right atrium to right ventricle. Then what happens? From right ventricle, this is deoxygenated blood, guys. Okay, so this blood goes to pulmonary artery through pulmonary valve. It also has a door there to enter the pulmonary artery. That door is called as pulmonary valve, and once it enters the pulmonary artery, it goes to the lungs. It goes to lungs for purification, and then the oxygenated blood will enter through pulmonary veins. Okay, so how is the heart getting oxygenated blood? It is going to enter through pulmonary veins and enter left atrium. And now when the left atrium is filled with oxygenated blood, it needs to come to left ventricle, so the bicuspid valve will open, thus allowing the flow of blood from left atrium to left ventricle. It's very simple. If you guys think that this is a little bit complicated diagram, you can always make your own diagram. So all you need to remember is just this 4 lines. This is right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. It's draining the blood here, and from the right atrium, if the blood has to go to the right ventricle, there is this door. Okay, that door is called tricuspid valve. I'm going to change the color so that it becomes like little easy. Imagine this is the heart. This is superior vena cava, this is inferior vena cava. Okay, so this is superior vena cava and this is inferior vena cava. So the blood is going to enter right atrium. From right atrium, the blood is going to go down to the right ventricle, and here this door in between them is called as tricuspid valve, and from here the blood goes to lungs for purification, and the oxygenated blood enters left atrium through pulmonary veins. Here the oxygenated blood is entering through pulmonary veins, and from pulmonary veins, the oxygenated blood, what happens is the left atrium is going to push the blood by opening the bicuspid valves, and then the heart is filled with oxygenated blood. Now the heart doesn't just keep the blood for itself, it needs to pump it, it needs to distribute the blood to all parts of our body, and that happens through aorta. Okay, so from aorta the blood is transported to all parts of the body. So are we clear with the working of the heart? It's very easy, right? Just 4 steps and then we are done. Now I have already said this, that actually not just this, but if you take out the heart and still keep it in like when you immediately take the heart out, it's still pumping. Okay, so it can really launch blood to such an extent that you can't even imagine. So like around 30 feet, that's too much, right? So it still pumps blood. Now let us see the heart. So about this, I have told you that heart is located in the sternum, right behind the sternum, and that is the location of the heart, and it's always towards the left side. Now coming to how the transportation is done at like cell level. Like I have told you how the heart is pumping blood, how transportation is done, like blood transportation, we have talked about that. But let us talk about how, you know, transportation occurs in cells, like minute cells. How is it going? How a molecule is entering another cell? Are cells having any transport system, or it's just the heart that is having transport system? Actually, plants also have a unique transportation system, and even animals have, and also at cellular level we do have a very interesting transportation system. So let's talk about osmosis. Okay, so this is a saltwater fish and this is a freshwater fish. Now what do we notice? And do you know which one drinks what kind of water? And how does it really drink water? And how is a tiny fish drinking water? You know, it sounds a little bit like different kind of a question, but there is a difference between a saltwater fish and freshwater fish, and I want you guys to know more about it, explore and ask your parents. But before that, I want to tell something about osmosis. So osmosis is a process where the movement of water molecules occur from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration. Okay, so what is osmosis? It is basically the movement of molecules from lower concentration to higher concentration. So it is defined as passive movement of water molecules across a partially permeable membrane. Now what is meant by partially permeable? Means it allows movement of few molecules and it does not allow movement of few molecules. Okay, that is what is meant by permeable. And partially permeable means it only permits few of the molecules to let it in and out. So we are clear with osmosis, right? So osmosis means movement of molecules from a region of lower solute to higher solute. Like easy way to remember is, think like this is the plant or something. How the water movement from lower to higher. You all know that, right? How water is transported from roots to all parts of the plant. That is nothing but osmosis. Okay, so the water is coming from a region of lower concentration to region of higher concentration. So there is a different term which is used for transportation of materials from a region of higher concentration to lower concentration. Do you guys know what it is? I'll be answering about that at end of the class. So I hope we are clear on this. Now coming to types of transportation. So there are basically two types of transportation. One is the passive type and one is the active type. Okay, so passive, by the name itself, it is like slow. Active means it really needs to pump and do some action. So in passive you have diffusion, osmosis and facilitated diffusion. Okay, we'll be talking about that in detail later, but for now remember that active transport always requires energy, right? Why? Because it needs to push, so therefore it requires more energy and it acts like a membrane pump. Okay, so there are also two kinds in it. One is endocytosis and exocytosis. Remember this easy trick. Exo means exit, endo means inside. Endocytosis means it allows molecules to enter inside the cell, and exocytosis means it helps to push out of the cells. Okay, so isn't it easy? Endo means inside, exo means outside. Now let us go through each of the types of passive and active transportation. The first one is simple diffusion. Okay, so I have told you that passive does not require much effort, but in diffusion what happens is the molecules are entering because there is a gradient difference. Okay, so due to some random movement of molecules, some can cross the cell membrane wall. So suppose think this and this molecules, they are able to enter from here to here. And how are they entering? Because there is some kind of gradient difference. So molecules move down their concentration gradient from a high to low concentration. Okay, so molecules move from a gradient concentration, that is from high to low, and those molecules are small, non-polar and uncharged. Okay, so why is the diffusion happening? Because the molecules are able to diffuse only because there is a gradient difference. Okay, and that too only from high to low. So diffusion means transfer of particles from a gradient of higher concentration to lower concentration. So let me repeat three things again. Passive transportation has three parts. First one is diffusion. In diffusion, the molecules move from high to low, and it happens because of gradient difference, and they are small and they are non-polar and uncharged molecules. Now coming to facilitated diffusion. Here this structure is of a potassium ion channel. Okay, what happens is, this is not very clear picture, but facilitated diffusion, by the name itself, what is meant by facilitated? Means it only allows certain kind of particles to move in. Okay, like this potassium ion channel will only allow potassium substances to move in. It's not going to allow sodium channels. So that is what is meant by facilitated diffusion, where movement is down, concentration gradient again to high to low, and the molecules that are too big and charged, they cannot get in, because like suppose think this is too big, it won't go inside, right? So only the ones which can move inside are the ones that are going to go inside. So some protein channels are open and closed. Example, sodium channels in nerve cells is just one of the example. So here you can see facilitated diffusion, what is happening. You see like only few are going in. Okay, not everything can go in. That is what is meant by facilitated. Now coming to passive transport. What do you see here? I can see a phospholipid bilayer. So there is two layers, right, of phospholipids, and there is a hydrophobic channel and there is a hydrophilic channel. Hydrophobic means it is, what is hydrophobic? Fear of water, and hydrophilic is going to take in water. So it has two channels. So here the passive transport is going to happen, and this is an integral protein. Okay, so it's clear, right? So this is how the passive transportation of material is going to happen. Now coming to active transport or membrane pump. So you all guys know which is the membrane pump in the cell. I have discussed this in the previous topic. It happens in mitochondria, and particles are moved against their concentration, that is from low to high. That's why active transport means low to high and passive transport means high to low. So low to high, like imagine you're moving a dumbbell. From low to high you require strength rather than just dropping it, right? So this is the active transport and this is the passive transport. That's all you need to remember. Okay, so like I told you, ATP is the powerhouse of the cell, and we have spoken about like active transportation occurring in the cell in the mitochondria, and here energy is required. Example is sodium potassium pump. Now coming to active transport. This is just a depiction of how the active transportation is occurring inside the cell. Now coming to vesicle. Why does it really look like a vehicle? A vesicle is a membrane-bound compartment used to shuttle substances around and within the cell. Now what do I mean by that is, this is a vesicle, right? It kind of looks like a cart, right? What is the function of this vesicle is, it helps in movement of things around the cell, like from one place to another. It helps in moving things. So basically vesicle can also be said as vehicle because it is used to shuttle things, like how a shuttle train, if you sit in a shuttle train in airport, you go from one point to other point, right? Similar way this vesicle is going to help in transport. Like for example, you need to transport this particular thing, it helps in transporting it from one part to the another. Okay, now so we have learned what is the function of the vesicle, and here if you have to transport this tiny part, who helps in doing so? Vesicle helps in doing so. So I hope you are clear about active transport and passive transport for now. And now let's go to endocytosis. Like I have told you, endo means inside the cell, okay, the transportation happening inside the cell. And here what happens is, if suppose a particle needs to enter the cell, it is going to form a foldings here so that the cell enters inside. Okay, so this is how endocytosis occurs. So it's going to fold in and take in the particle inside. Example is phagocytosis. Now phagocytosis occurs in amoeba, where whenever it sees food, it forms like a false feet and it's going to engulf it. That is what is called as phagocytosis. So it is also example of endocytosis. And exocytosis means here you can see it's going to push this out of the cell. Like here you can see that there are green color particles here, right? Here what is happening? It's pushing it out. That occurs only because of exocytosis. And here there is a picture of letting these green particles inside the cell, that is called as endocytosis. Okay. So endocytosis means you let the particles inside the cell. Exocytosis means you push the particles outside the cells. Okay. Are we clear? So we have studied about endocytosis and exocytosis. This is just how a protein is being transported over here. This is the nucleus, this is the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and here these are the transport vesicles which are acting like a vehicles, and then from there it is going to give some products which are going to go out of the cell. So out means exit, exit means exocytosis. So that is the process, and how a vesicle is formed is what in a similar process, which I am going to link a small video. But for now we need to remember a very simple differences in this, like what is meant by diffusion, what is facilitated diffusion, what is osmosis, what is active transport with carrier proteins, and what is endocytosis and exocytosis. So before that, like I have told you, right, diffusion happens because there is a pressure gradient difference, and diffusion, facilitated diffusion and osmosis is easy because it's going from a high concentration to low concentration, but whereas active transport means from lower concentration to higher concentration. And facilitated diffusion means, for example, you have a potassium ion channel. So what happens in that? What happens is, if there is some other sodium ion there, what will the potassium channel do? The facilitated diffusion, it takes care that sodium is pushed out, only potassium is going to come in. That is the function of the facilitated diffusion. And osmosis we have already discussed. Active transport, I have told you, example is like powerhouse of the cell, ATP formation, how it is transported. Active happens from, it requires lot of energy because it is pushing, right, from lower to higher. And now endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis means endo means inside, is how you need to remember. Exocytosis means pushing out of the cell, that is exit. Okay, so endocytosis, what happens is it takes the particle inside. Now let me give you an example. Okay, you all know about amoeba, right? So suppose think this is amoeba. Amoeba basically looks like finger projections, and this is the food particle. Now if this is the food entering, what does this amoeba do is, it's going to form false feet like this, and then it is going to eat it. Okay, so this process is called, these are pseudopods or false feet, and the way it's going to eat is called as phagocytosis, the process of forming false feet and then engulfing the food. Okay, so this is also an example of endocytosis. Whereas suppose if I need to get rid of something from here, if I open this and let it out, that is exocytosis. As the name suggests, exo means exit, endo means inside. So this is how you guys need to remember. So I have explained about osmosis and like diffusion, active transport, passive transport and everything. Now we will talk about how transportation is done in the plants. Okay, so how is the transportation done in the plants? So I have told you about cellular level how transportation is done, but in plants they have an interesting mechanism. They have a different mechanism for transportation of water, and they have a different mechanism for transportation of food. So xylem helps in transportation of water. Okay, whereas phloem helps in transportation of food. Okay, so here you can see xylem is only doing the transportation of water like a one way. Like look at here, their walls are thick, whereas phloem walls are thin, and they have a hollow structure, whereas these have like perforations. And here water and minerals are distributed, and here water and food is distributed. So based on the diagram, what are the differences that you guys can write between xylem and phloem? So for xylem, it is transportation of water is done in xylem, whereas in phloem, transportation of food and water. Let me tell you something interesting. Xylem cells are usually dead and they are hollow, whereas phloem cells have pitted appearance. And this is one-way transportation system and this is two-way transportation system. The walls are thick, the walls are thin in phloem. So these are the differences. So let's go through it again. So xylem helps in transportation of water, and it's only one way from roots to all parts of the plant. Whereas in phloem, it is two-way flow. That is, it transports water and food from lower level to higher level and also from higher parts to the lower parts. And in xylem, it is thick-walled and the cells are usually dead and they are hollow, whereas phloem cells are thin-walled and they have perforations. So these are few of the differences that you need to remember about xylem and phloem. So plants don't have heart. That is the reason that they have xylem and phloem. And let me tell you guys something interesting. So this xylem and phloem, what are they? Are they heart for the plants, or what are they exactly? They are called as, they are the parts of vascular tissue. Plants have 4 important types of tissues, okay? They have dermal tissue, vascular tissue, ground tissue, okay? So there are many tissues, but one of the tissue is called as vascular tissue, and xylem and phloem are a part of that. So it's not the heart that's helping the plants, it's the vascular tissue, that is xylem and phloem, that are helping the plants to transport minerals and waters. Now, what is transpiration? Everyone knows about water vapor, right? When you see in the early mornings, you can notice like a dewy kind of look on the leaves, like you can see a very small drops of water, and there is, what is it? Do you guys know what it is? So what happens in the plants is usually there is loss of water, okay? There is loss of water from surface of the leaves, like you can see such small drops of water. That is called as transpiration. What is it called? It is called as transpiration. Transpiration is the loss of water vapor from the stems and leaves of the plant. So what is transpiration? It is the loss of the water from the stems and leaves of the plant. Light energy converts water in the leaves. So this is the light energy. It is converting the water in the leaves into vapor, which evaporates from the leaf through bean-shaped structure like stomata. So these pores open and the water is going to evaporate. Okay, so light energies converts the water in the leaf into vapor. So how is the vapor formed from the leaf? It's converted, like the sun, it has light energy, right? So when it falls on the leaf, it's going to evaporate. The water which is present in the leaf is going to evaporate. So this is pretty much about the transpiration. So transportation of food and water is done by xylem and phloem, and transpiration occurs in the form of water vapor through leaves. Okay. New water is absorbed from the soil by roots, creating a difference in pressure between leaves, which is lower concentration, and roots, which is a higher concentration. So this is a plant. Okay. Now what happens is, here water has evaporated, right? So this is leaves, you all guys know. These are the roots. So here you have low concentration and here you have high concentration. Okay, so whenever there is a pressure difference, right? So here there is a high concentration, here there is a low concentration. So water will flow through xylem. Now the water is going to move up only through xylem. That's why it has one-way flow, because if there is no concentration there, what's the point in transporting water back? First you need the water to enter up, right? So whatever the water is lost in the form of the water vapor, that is replenished with the help of this xylem. Okay, so what does the xylem do? It is going to help the plant regain its water. And let me repeat all of it again. So what is happening? Because of the light energy, the leaves, when this light energy is falling on the leaves, the water is getting evaporated. So there is not much water. So this leaf has lower concentration. But in the soil, we water the plants, right? So there is lot of water in the roots. So it is at a higher concentration, this is at a lower concentration. So the plant, it has a mechanism, that is through xylem, there is a one-way flow of water from higher concentration to the lower concentration. So the water reaches from roots to leaves, and therefore whatever water is lost, now it is getting back. The plant is getting back the water, whatever has been lost. So now I have told you that this exchange of water vapor, like exchange of materials as well as like the loss of water in the form of vapor, is through stomata. Okay, so stomata are the pores that are present on the underside of the leaf, which facilitate gas exchange that is needed for photosynthesis. Like you all know what is meant by photosynthesis, right? Sunlight, the raw materials required for the photosynthesis are sunlight, chlorophyll, water, carbon dioxide, and the plants is going to give out food and oxygen. So this thing, taking in carbon dioxide, giving out oxygen, this exchange of gases is happening through stomata. Okay, so where is this exchange of gases happening? That is carbon dioxide coming in, oxygen going out, happens through stomata. As photosynthetic gas exchange requires stomata to open, transpiration will be affected by the level of photosynthesis. So only during the process of photosynthesis, the transpiration process will be affected. So I hope you guys have understood how transportation is done in humans, how transportation is done in plants, that is through xylem and phloem, how transpiration occurs in plants, that is through water vapor, and we have also studied what are the types of transport system that occurs in the cell, that is active transport and passive transport. So let's take a quick quiz along with me, and I'll be asking a few questions, so even you can try to answer it in your notebook, or you can like answer along with me. Okay, so transpiration is gain of water. Is this true? Is this true? It's absolutely false. Why? Because transpiration means loss of water. So what happens is when sun, this is the sun that gives the light energy. So sun, when it falls on the leaves, water is going to get evaporated. And this water, when it evaporates, there is difference in concentration in the leaves and the roots. But for now, transpiration means loss of water from the plants, and this process is called as transpiration in the form of water vapor. So loss of water from the plants in the form of water vapor is called as transpiration. Now, I'll ask you a question about heart. Why do we need lungs to purify the blood in circulatory system? Can anyone tell me? Because I have always thought as a kid that circulatory system just involves heart. I have never thought that lung plays a role. And you must be also wondering, why do we really need a lungs, right? So do you know the answer? Why do we need? So all the impure blood is going to enter heart, right? Now, heart has to pump blood to all parts of the body. So do you think that we should pump deoxygenated blood, that is impure blood, to all parts of the body? Then we would be dead. You know why? Because the blood has a lot of carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is a waste product which we need to get rid of. We need oxygenated blood, and who takes out carbon dioxide and gives in oxygen in our body is done by lungs, that is respiratory system. So what do lungs do? They remove carbon dioxide and give oxygen, right? So this role is being done by lungs. So if we don't have lungs, we won't have oxygen. So from here the impure blood goes to the lungs, and in lungs what happens is it gets purified. So the blood becomes oxygenated and then enters heart. Okay, so why do we need lungs? So that our blood is oxygenated. We don't get deoxygenated blood all through our body. So we definitely need lungs to purify the blood in circulatory system, because it is the one who is going to change deoxygenated blood into oxygenated blood and distribute to all parts of the body. So the blood has oxygen, not carbon dioxide. Okay. Now, facilitated diffusion is permeable to all. Is it true or false? Example is, suppose think this is a potassium channel. So what do you think? Is facilitated diffusion going to allow all the molecules to transfer from one place to another? I don't think so, because by the name itself, when you don't understand something, break the word. So facilitated means it allows only few things. Okay, so suppose think this is potassium ion and this is sodium ion. Okay, actually let me give you a example showing the structure. So these are the potassium ions, and think I want to draw something different. Okay, so what happens is facilitated diffusion only allows these molecules to come, and it's going to leave these behind. So facilitated diffusion is a process where there is transportation of materials in a semi-permeable way. Okay, it does not allow all the substances to transfer. So it's going to allow only few of the things. So semi-permeable. So facilitated diffusion means diffusion of particles but in a semi-permeable way. Now, what is the difference between endocytosis and exocytosis? So let us talk about the differences between endocytosis and exocytosis. Now coming to endocytosis. So like by the name itself I told you, remember exo stands for exit. Okay, so endocytosis means, a clear example is amoeba. Now think this is an amoeba. Okay, now it sees yummy food particle. So what does it do is it forms pseudopods. Okay, so it forms false feet or pseudopods, and then it is going to engulf it completely. Okay, so endocytosis means the particle is entering inside the cell. Just remember that the particle is going to enter cell. Whereas in exocytosis, what happens is the particle is going to exit the cell. Okay, so exocytosis means it's going out. Like a clear example is, suppose think, I need to show you guys what is exocytosis. This is exocytosis, that is this particles are going out of the cell. Okay, so endocytosis means the particles are entering inside the cell. Exocytosis means they are going out of the cell. So I hope you guys have understood everything about the transportation in humans, how it happens in cellular level, what is active transport, what is passive transport, and how transportation is done in plants, that is through xylem and phloem. That is, xylem helps in transportation of water, phloem helps in transportation of food and water. What is the process where the water is lost from the leaves in the form of water vapor is called as transpiration. Okay, so I hope you guys are clear with transportation, and thanks for watching, and stay tuned to Classroom TV.